In episode 166 of the Guitar Music Theory podcast, I answer listener questions about timing, playing horizontal pentatonic patterns, selecting good notes for your bass lines, and more. Greetings, guitar engineers. Welcome to the Guitar Music Theory podcast. If you're captivated by the magic of guitar music and eager to unravel the mysteries of music theory, you're in the right place. I'm Desi Cerna, your host, fellow guitar enthusiast, and author of Fretboard Theory, Guitar Theory for Dummies, Guitar Picking Mechanics, and more. In each episode of this podcast, I delve into the fascinating world of guitar and music theory, demystifying complex concepts and providing practical insights to help you become a more informed and skilled guitarist. Together, we'll explore chord progressions, scales, improvisation techniques, and more, unlocking the secrets that make guitar music an irresistible art. Today, in episode 166, I'm going to answer more listener questions. I've got questions about rhythm and timing, connecting pentatonic scale patterns horizontally, selecting good notes for your bass lines, and more. I'm also going to recap some recent performances that I mentioned in my previous podcast episode, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how I keep track of all the material that I have to learn and know to play those shows. It's all going to be a great discussion, but before we get started, what should you specifically be working on right now in order to become a better guitarist? Go to my website, guitarmusictheory.com. Answer the question I ask you about your playing, and I'll send you free custom video instruction that's calibrated to your current level. Whether you're a beginner still needing to learn the basics, or you need help with bar chords, finger picking, guitar soloing, or understanding music theory, I have a free course for you. I can provide you with a plan to put you on track to fill gaps in your playing so you can move forward and reach your music goals. Enroll in your free video course now at guitarmusictheory.com. You can click on the link in the podcast show notes. All right, so we are ready to dive in. And, the first thing I might talk about is maybe give you an update. It's been a while since I had a podcast out, and in my previous podcast, I talked about how I prepared to play with a Huey Lewis tribute band. And then I traveled to Florida and played a show in Panama City at the, I believe that was the Holiday Inn Resort there, and it was just spectacular and a very nice resort, and we played at a stage that with the beach right behind us, and I got some time to actually get in the water and enjoy the sunshine, and it was a really fun gig, and just it was great to get away like that. Then we traveled to the Villages, more like kind of getting towards Central Florida, and played at a theater there. That was fantastic. The audience was very enthusiastic, really enjoyed the show. They had a great in-house light system and light guy that really made the show spectacular. It made us feel like we were rock stars. And then we traveled to Delray Beach and played at a place called Arts Garage. And just had a lot of fun. I love playing the Huey Lewis music and performing it, and it was fun to pile into a van and travel and do kind of a little mini tour and pretend to be a rock star, I guess. Came home, got really sick, so I caught a viral cold or something, and but at the end of that week, I had to travel to Ohio, and I played at Veterans Park Amphitheater in Springfield, Ohio. And that was an outdoor venue, And a lot of people showed up. Great crowd, great show. We couldn't use our video on that particular stage. We have a video portion of the show. So you're watching us perform the music, and there's video clips of old Huey Lewis videos and stuff like that. And the video really adds to it. But we still played a great show without it, and the crowd there was very enthusiastic, and it was a lot of fun. And then I had family that traveled down from my hometown of Toledo, including my dad and stepmother and some aunts and uncles, to watch me play, and they really enjoyed it, and that was super special to be able to play for some family. And so that's what I did, and I'm back now, and the band called the Heart of Rock and Roll, they have more dates coming up. They're traveling to New York and Wisconsin and some other states. I was not available to play those dates, though. Wish I could, but it just didn't work with my schedule. So fortunately, they have someone else that can take over the lead guitar duties. But I'm sure that I will have more dates with that band in the future, and I'll keep you guys posted. And maybe I come somewhere near your town and you can come out to see me play and meet me. I would love that. I did get to meet some people while I was traveling that were either a podcast listener or a customer or student in some way, and I always enjoy those meetings. And it was just fun for me to kind of like take everything that I study and teach and do and actually put it to use in the real world performing music. That's ultimately what it's supposed to be about. We're supposed to get out there and perform and play with others. And, these band gigs, they are kind of just a side thing for me. Running my business, my instruction business is really my job and my bread and butter. I do get paid for those live performances, but it's insignificant compared to what I earn, teaching, and I don't want anything to interfere with my main source of income here. I do love to get out and play music, though, so I want to continue to do that because it's important, and I encourage other people to do that too. If you have any opportunity to play, whether it's to play in a band or a cover band or record a song or play at church or just throw together a garage band in the neighborhood, maybe play a block party or something like that, I would highly encourage you to do that. All right, well, moving on, I want to share an email that I actually just recently received, and it comes from Stefan in Canada, and he says, "Hi, Desi. I believe I've listened to most, if not all, of your podcasts, and I will start by saying thank you for doing these. Your guitar theory knowledge and teaching style is up there among the very best in this field." Well, thank you, Stefan. He goes on to say, "I personally absolutely love the instrument and everything guitar/music theory. Hence, I truly enjoy and appreciate your content, which resonates deeply with me. Your approach to explaining concepts and how music is created on guitar is absolutely amazing. I'm writing to share my thoughts on your very latest podcast." He's talking about episode 165 called Preparing for Huey Lewis Tribute Band Gig. He says, "I'm writing to share my thoughts about that podcast, which I found particularly insightful. It made me realize what it means to actually play in a band context. I think we all sort of get a little narrow-minded when it comes to playing guitar at times, be it chasing a tone, playing a riff or part of a song, or just noodling around with patterns and guitar concepts. And we sometimes forget that the true goal is about making music, which ultimately involves playing with other instruments, musicians." That's true, yeah. He continues, "It was very interesting to see how you approach a gig like this. I will say that I have a ton of respect for musicians. This is not easy, even though it may appear to be easy for some. There's a lot of work that goes into playing real music." Real in quotations there. He keeps going. "One aspect that I wouldn't mind if you could touch on is timing. While theory in general can be quite academic in the sense that one can learn this stuff with a good amount of research and time dedication, one thing that continues to elude me is timing, as there seems to be no set path to mastering this concept, and it's so very key. And your podcast highlighted this even more for me. How the heck do you keep track of where you are in a song, and when do you know to come in out with your part when everything else is going on? Do you count from the very start and keep track of bars? Do you have set markers or specific beats, i.e. second snare after a specific lyric? Is it mostly by ear, internalizing the song by listening to it a lot? I'm floored at how easy you make those riff solos fit perfectly with the rest of the music, timing-wise. Again, note selection, chord tones, patterns, and that type of music theory I totally get, as it is fairly black and white. But timing seems like an elusive thing for me. How the heck do you remember that this part starts on the and of two, for example? And then how do you even begin to identify and of two when you are coming in after the song has been playing for a bit? Maybe you can have a podcast dedicated to timing. Again, I'm simply floored as to how you master all of this with such ease. If you can find a way to distill this for us, that would be amazing. Well, thank you very much, Stefan, for that kind email, and I'm thrilled that you find what I do so helpful and inspiring. Timing is a tricky thing because it's a feel thing, and so it's not just a feel thing, but it includes feel. And typically, the people who have the best timing are the ones that feel it naturally. And the people who struggle the most with timing are the people who don't feel it naturally. You can improve your sense of timing by learning about it, understanding how things work, getting a feel for what it's like to play in the downbeats and the upbeats, and learning the basics of rhythm and counting, and then applying that to the things that you play so that you can connect that information to what you feel when you play. So it's not just enough to learn how to count rhythms or when a song part, on which beat a song part comes in. You need to learn how to play that, get the feel for it, and associate that feeling with that particular beat or that timing, and so on. And it's definitely something that anyone can improve on. Some people are going to be better than others, just like some people are better, baseball players than others, or some people are, able to bench press more than others. But you can learn about that. You can make some improvements. And this might be something, Stefan, that would be good for us to maybe discuss in a private Zoom lesson, because it sounds like maybe you kind of need some specific help filling in some gaps that you're just having a hard time understanding. So, I'd love to connect with you, and we can, play some things, and I can show you how I would train students. I will show you what goes through my mind when I need to pay attention to the timing of something. I'm someone that I would say, generally speaking, I had a good sense of timing from the beginning, definitely above average for sure. It was actually really good with some things, but then other times I struggled. So I think what really helped me advance and get good was that I was able to take advantage of things that came naturally to me, but then I was able to use my brain to figure out how to make up for some of my deficits. And so I did learn how to read standard musical notation. I learned how to count 16th notes and triplets and all of that. And I did practice that. And like I said earlier, consciously work toward taking the things that I was feeling and understanding what they were rhythmically, and then taking things that I wasn't feeling and analyzing it, and then practicing it until I could feel it. And that often involves paying attention to when something's on a downstroke or an upstroke, or when it's on a downbeat or an upbeat. And regarding, what you said in your message, am I keeping track of bars? Am I counting? Am I listening to the snare or other instruments to get cues? I typically don't count bars. I Oh, that's not true. Sometimes I have to count bars. Okay, so for example, on the Huey Lewis gig, there's some songs where we extended the intro because there's a video segment to the show or something, or there's something else going on, and I have to come in on after 8 bars, and I wasn't feeling it because there wasn't anything going on in the track musically. And because it was synced to video or something like that, there was something else going on. And so when that click track, when the drummer would give us a cue, I would have to count in my head. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, and so on. 8, 2, 3, 4, and I'm in. Well, what song is it? It's the way we start I Want a New Drug. The drummer comes in, and he's just doing quarter notes on the kick drum. So as soon as I hear him play, I start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3, 4, 7, 2, 3, 4, 8, 2. So, I got a bad pot here. Did you hear that crackle when I turned my volume down? I'm playing my PRS McCarty 594 with Seymour Duncan 59 pickups, playing through a Mesa Boogie Mark III profile from Tone Junkie for this one. And I got some chorus on here. And that beginning part should have been... I got some pickup notes, so it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's the first beat of measure 9. So I am counting in my head. So to answer your question, sometimes I count bars, but generally speaking, when I'm playing a song, I don't count bars because I can feel it. I can feel that the singer just sang the last line of the verse, we're going to the chorus, or we just sang the last line of the chorus, we're going, to the next section. I don't necessarily need to count those bars. Now, with guitar solos, sometimes it's critical because I only have so many bars of solo, and I have to come out of it, particularly if we're on a track because we're synced to video, so I can't just improvise and come out of it when I want. In that case, instead of actually counting bars, what I did is I went through and I came up with a game plan where I was like, okay, I'm in this position here, So I'm like, okay, I'm in this position, and that's how many bars is that? 1, 2, 3, that's 4 bars or 8 bars or something. It's like, okay, well then I'll move up to the next position, And I planned my solo in sections. So it's like, okay, I'm going to go from this position, and I worked out my basic idea of what I was going to do and how I was going to build the solo. And I did this as I was rehearsing and practicing. And then I finish up here, where I'm like, I come out of it, and that's the cue when I come out of the high part there down here to... That's the cue for the band, and then we go into the final verse there. So I had to plan that out ahead of time. I don't count bars while I'm playing that solo. I couldn't count bars while I'm playing that solo. I got my hands and my brain is full playing those licks and stuff. I have a general idea of how I'm going to play that solo. I did work out some lines specifically because it's a tribute band, so I wanted to copy some of the signature lines from there. And I don't like to leave spontaneity to chance. Improvising is fun, but with a show like that, I wanted to make sure I had a general idea of what I was going to do so it sounds good every time. But I did plan it out in sections, and I counted it out to make sure that I was covering the right amount of bars. I forget how many bars that whole solo section is, but I have it all worked out now. And so I play through my little, plan that I have there, and I come out of it, and I know that I'm coming out of it at the right time, and I cue the band, and they're like, Desi just came out of it, the singer comes back in. So there is some planning that goes on like that. But I don't have to do that for, most songs. If I'm playing Wonderful Tonight by Eric Clapton or Brown Eyed Girl by Van Morrison, I don't have to count bars. I just feel it. I know when I'm going, I know that's the end there. I don't have to count the bars and say, is this where it ends? I don't know. I hope I'm being helpful. But I do sometimes listen to cues in the music. There's... there are some times where it's like you hear the drummers on tight hi-hats or something. And then at the end of the verse, he's like, and then he's building up to a drum fill, crash, because we're transitioning into the next section of the song. We're going from verse or chorus. So I do listen to stuff like that, like, okay, here we go. And this is where other musicians can be really good at leading each other. A drummer in particular, his dynamics or her dynamics can play an important role into helping people realize that we're wrapping up this section and we're transitioning into the next. Bass players can do that too, but it's like, okay, you hear him start walking up from the 1 chord to the 4 chord or something, because that's where you go when you head to the chorus. And we guitar players can do that too at times. I mentioned how I come out of that solo to I Want a New Drug, and I have a very specific part that I come out of there and play, so I'm like, whoops, where's my lead line? So I'm like, I want a new drug, so I'm kind of cueing people too by playing some specific parts that are familiar to them. Let's see. So you asked, do I have some specific markers, instruments? Yeah, something like that. Is it mostly by ear, listening to it? Yeah. So it's a combination of things for me. I do just kind of naturally feel some things, and I don't really need to think about it. Sometimes I need to say, how many bars was that? Is that 8? Sometimes I need to count if there isn't anything in the music that it can cue me. The reason why I count the beginning of I Want a New Drug is because all I hear is this. And when you got to be cued to the video, can I feel 8 bars? Yeah, probably at this point after doing it enough, but I want to make darn sure. And so I count it. All right, well, all that to say, Stefan or anyone else listening that maybe needs some help with timing, you could go to the website. In my menu, you can click on Zoom lessons and classes, and you can book a private lesson and maybe have some specific things in mind that you play that you struggle with the timing. And let's go through them together, and I'll give you some pointers and tips. I'll tell you how I had trained students in the past, how I trained myself in the past, ways that maybe you count, or ways that you can feel it, cues you can take in the music. We'll explore different options. I've got an alarm going off here. We can explore some different options, and I can help you. And, maybe I'll introduce you to some new ways of thinking about things that you didn't think about before, and you can kind of take it from there and kind of guide yourself. So I'm recommending a private lesson just because Stefan has played for decades, a long, long time. So I want to see specifically what he does well, what he still might be struggling with. That's going to be kind of unique to each person. But if you're listening and you're still kind of in that beginner phase, maybe even an early intermediate phase, and you're still struggling with timing, I do have instruction on my website, general instruction that will give you what you need. So just head over to guitarmusictheory.com. I ask you a question about your playing, and I say, what describes you best? Be honest, and select the one that describes you best. And I'll make some recommendations for some instruction, because in some of the courses that I have, as I'm teaching fundamental skills, I do say, let's get a feel for when the guitar does this, or did you hear the drummer do that? That's our cue. I do mention that sort of thing, and I walk you through some examples and teach you how to listen to the music and feel it and feel your part connecting to the music. And I talk about following the form of a song, knowing when you go from a verse to a chorus, and so on. So check out that instruction on the website. We are moving on. Brett has a question about the pentatonic scale. He says, "Hello, Desi. I'm in Chapter 2 of Fretboard Theory, Pentatonic Scales. My question is, if I play the B major pentatonic scale, is the first note of pattern 1 the low E string 4th fret, or is it the low E string 7th fret?" So I answered and said, "Hey, Brett, the B major pentatonic scale and the G minor pentatonic scale use the very same notes. One just starts on B and one starts on G sharp. Your difference is your starting point, or which note is functioning as the tonic in the music. Technically, the first note of the B major pentatonic scale ought to be B. So, to answer Brett's question, start at the 7th fret. However, the G sharp note at the 4th fret is also part of the scale. It is a note from the scale. And when we learn scale patterns, we learn how to play all of the available notes for a scale in a particular position. So in this particular position, I have that G sharp available to me at the 4th fret, and I just learned the pattern all the way across the fretboard. In this case, I'm starting at G sharp at the 4th fret on the 6th string. I end at B at the 7th fret on the 1st string, and that covers a particular position, and that's where our patterns come from. These are notes of the G minor pentatonic or the B major pentatonic. They are the same. The difference is what is going to be functioning as our root note when we use it. Are we going to use the B? Or are we going to use the G? But you want to know the whole pattern, because when you're in G sharp minor, the B is still part of the scale. You're going to use that sometimes. And when you're in the B major pentatonic scale, you're going to use a G sharp some of the time. So you're going to go... Whoops. So the G sharp is still part of the scale. Learn it that way. It's confusing because you're like, I'm playing this pattern. It says it's B major pentatonic. Why am I starting on G sharp? Well, because we're learning a pattern that covers a particular position. So we can think about the B major pentatonic scale specifically as being B to B musically. But when we're learning how to cover a particular position, in this particular position, we start on G sharp. There's all the notes that complete that position or that pattern. So Brett replied to my email, and he says, well, that makes sense. New question. I'm having a hard time moving across the fretboard horizontally with the pentatonic scale. Do you need to visualize it? Look before you leap to play from one pattern to the next. Horizontally, that is. Vertically, I am proficient. So the notes of the B major pentatonic are scattered all over the fretboard, or any pentatonic key. It doesn't matter what we use. And so what we do is we just go position to position, and we learn how to play all of the available notes. Well, then what happens is each position has a unique pattern. This particular pattern is usually what most people think of as pattern 1 because it's the first pattern that they learn, but the numbers are irrelevant. These are notes of B major pentatonic or G minor pentatonic in this position, and then I can shift up to the next position and play through those all the available notes of this same scale in the next position, and I get a different pattern, and I can go up to the next position. There's all the same notes, but in the next position, and it makes a different pattern. And so he's talking about how do you connect horizontally when you go from pattern 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 and so on. He says he's good vertically. When he plays in one position and goes up and down the pattern, he's good, but then to shift to the next position, I think maybe he's just getting confused and maybe not remembering what the next pattern is. So that's just something that you just practice, and you don't want to dwell too much on it, though. Familiarize yourself with how you go from one pattern to the next. Familiarize yourself with the patterns. And, as I teach in my theory course, you can visualize how a portion of each pattern, when I played this pattern 1, all of the notes at the 7th fret and the 6th fret are reused and become part of the next pattern. Now I'm using all those notes at frets 6 and 7, but now together with notes at frets 9, 8, 9 and 8. So you can kind of visualize that. Some people just get used to the feel. You play through these patterns enough and muscle memory takes over, and that's okay. But I said don't dwell on it too much, because you just want to familiarize yourself with the idea of how you connect these patterns. They're the same patterns regardless of what key you're in. You just shift at which fret you begin the patterns for the different keys. But you really want to move on and learn how to play some melodies, some riffs, some solos, maybe even a bass line or something that uses the pentatonic pattern, because that's really going to help everything stick. So as I'm moving, horizontally, for example, I'm going to move to the key of C here. So I'm thinking about the solo to Let It Be by the Beatles. Having a hard time remembering it, but I know the general idea here. So I'm in C major pentatonic. I use a little bit of pattern 5, pattern 1, back to pattern 5, pattern 1, from pattern 1 into pattern 2, pattern 1, back into pattern 5. So when you start playing musical parts, instead of just looking at these as patterns, you think about those lead lines that you play from songs, and you see how those players shift horizontally from one pattern to another, and that really just helps things stick and make sense. So when I think about moving from pattern 5 to pattern 1 to pattern 2, I'm thinking, like Let It Be. So I just went from 5 to 1 to 2 to 1 to 5. So if you're following my instruction, I make lots of references to familiar songs, and I say, hey, go learn some of these parts. That's really going to help it stick. You don't want to get stuck in the rut of just practicing pentatonic patterns. Familiarize yourself with them, but then move on to learning how to play parts with them. And then you'll get good at them, and you'll sharpen your technique, and you'll learn how players would slide into certain notes or bend others or hammer on or pull off. And, a lot of players learn just from playing songs. They can solo and play lead lines, and you say, well, what are you doing? And they're like, I don't know. Well, how could that be possible? Well, they do know. They learned solos like Let It Be and other stuff. Maybe they picked it up off a record by ear, or they got tab, or a friend showed them, or whatever. And they just started memorizing these patterns that were coming from these song parts, and they pieced things together that way. But they never actually learned that, oh, that's in a scale, and it's called the pentatonic. So they say to you, I don't know what I'm doing. Well, the reality is they know exactly what they're doing. They know those patterns. They've got the muscle memory. They know how to play melodic parts in them because they copied it from songs. It makes perfect sense in their head. They're doing the right thing. They just didn't realize that it was, the pentatonic. So all that to say, I like to know what I'm doing. I like to introduce hey, this is a scale. It's the pentatonic. It's used for some melodies and solos and riffs. Here's how the patterns are formed. Here's the structure, yada, yada, yada. But eventually, let's get to playing music with it. Let's get to playing some songs. And over time, you will get more and more comfortable with the scale patterns and their usage. See Fretboard Theory Chapter 2 for references to popular songs that feature some type of pentatonic part. And next we have another pentatonic question or pentatonic comment. Herb says, I still spend about 30 to 45 minutes daily playing the 5 pentatonic scale shapes to commit them to memory, but it hasn't happened yet. Well, I would question what you mean about memorizing the shapes. I can't imagine that you probably could memorize them in one sitting. If you start with E minor pentatonic in the open position, I teach this as pattern 1. You just play up and down that until you have it memorized and kind of committed to muscle memory. Then you go to pattern 2 and do the same thing. I look at it on the fretboard and visualize the shape that the pattern makes. I figure out how I'm going to finger it. And then I play through it until some hand memory begins to set in. Then you go to the pattern 3 and work with that until you can visualize that pattern on the fretboard and you get used to that fingering. Every time you learn a new pattern, go back to the one before it. Make sure you haven't forgotten it. And then from 3, you go to 4, 5, and so on, and until you've played through all of them. And that's it. I mean, honestly, it shouldn't take that long. And then the next step is learn how to transpose them, go to a different key. You play the same patterns, but now you're starting in a different position on a different note. And just get used to how you connect the patterns and play in some different keys. And then the next step is, okay, how do we use this pattern now to play some simple melodies or riffs or something like that? As you learn those parts, look at the key that it's in and the patterns that are in use and how it's moving through the patterns and connecting them, that uses pentatonic patterns, or that uses pentatonic patterns. So you want to stop practicing the patterns and you want to start practicing songs that use the patterns. So I don't know, Herb, if you meant something else. I can't imagine that spending 30 to 45 minutes a day trying to memorize the patterns, just the patterns themselves. If you want to send me an email and maybe give me some more information on what you're struggling with, and you can always book a private lesson. Let's go through it together, and let's work on it together. Just need to maybe get some more information so I can best help you. All right, moving on. This next email comes from a bass player, Dennis, and he says, "Hey, Desi, I just wanted to comment about singing after listening to a recent podcast. I mainly play bass and some guitar, and I've started singing more and more. Just like you, I never paid much attention to the lyrics, but now that I have to, one of the interesting things that has happened is that listening to the lyrics has made me a much more soulful player, because for the first time, I'm actually absorbing what the songwriter was trying to say. just an observation reacting to what you said about how these things connect. Thanks and keep up the good work, and I would be interested in what course you would recommend for a bass player trying to get a better handle on playing the right notes that aren't just root notes to complement the chords. I'm getting better at it, but need to strengthen my game. Thanks. So Dennis is talking about, in a previous podcast episode, I had answered a question about playing and singing, and so he's just saying that, yeah, there's lots of advantages to that. When you pay attention to the lyrics, maybe you're more connected to emotionally what's happening in the song, and that can influence your playing in a good way. But then he says, any suggestions for bass players to learn how to play better bass lines so you're not just thumping on the root notes? Well, this is where my theory course, like fretboard theory and guitar theory for dummies, can come into play. Even though it's guitar focused, there's a lot of stuff that is relevant to bass. Understanding chord construction, arpeggios, scales. So, for example, you might be playing a song like Stir It Up by Bob Marley, which is based on the chords A, D, and E. And, okay, well, you could just play the root notes, Steer it up. Lean up, darling, steer it up. I got my bass connected. But the bass has a lot more movement than that. Well, this is where it's helpful to understand music theory and know scale patterns and arpeggios as a bass player too. So when I teach that in my books and video courses for guitar, well, bass has E, A, D, and G strings, so you can just ignore the high E and the B string on the guitar diagrams. You can still play the same shapes and arpeggios and things, scale patterns on the bass. So I'm going to think about, okay, well, Stir It Up is in the A major scale. So maybe I want to use the scale tones as stepping stones to go from one root note to another. All right. Or let's think about the chords. The chords are A, D, and E. Well, what are the notes of those chords? We don't play chords on a bass, I mean, you could at times, but generally speaking, that's not the role of the bass. But we still want to know the arpeggios and what the notes are of the chords that we're playing over as bass players. Well, A is made up of A, C sharp, and D. So you can learn those arpeggio patterns. D is made up of D, F sharp, and A. E is E, G sharp, and B. All right, now let's put together a bass line that as we're playing over the chords, we are considering other notes that are part of the chords, not just the roots. And that's essentially what's happening in that song, and it does make the bass line much more interesting. So let me give you some other examples while I got the bass out here. Let's think about something like Come Together by the Beatles, right? Well, what's happening here? This is in the key of D minor. So Paul McCartney could have just come in and went. But instead, he knows more about music and melody and movement. You can think about the D minor pentatonic. Or think about a D minor arpeggio. And so this movement is actually kind of moving through some of those arpeggio and scale notes there. You can think of that as the minor pentatonic. Or you can think of it as from here, just part of a D minor chord. Bass players wouldn't play that, sounds muddy, but we could play those notes individually. mentioned the pentatonic. Think about bass lines like Lowrider by War. So this is kind of riffing around in the G minor pentatonic. So instead of just hitting G, you can put a lot more movement in there with the scale. Great bass line to learn to see how you can add more movement. And so, if you play a variety of songs on bass, and if you learn a little bit about music theory, the same stuff I teach in my guitar theory, books and videos, and you start to analyze these songs, you're going to see that it's not uncommon for bass players to use some alternate bass notes, to make use of connecting some root notes with scale tones in between that's related to the key, or hitting other notes, playing the fifth of the chord instead of the root, or the third of the chord, arpeggios, that sort of thing. Think about something like We Are the Champions. So we are champions, my friend. We keep on fighting till the end. So, starting here, F. What's that? Well, F climbing up the scale to its major third. Some nice movement there. I just played then the third to the root and led down to the next chord change. Octave, fifth. Nice little movement there. Using the octave, fifth, root, root. Climbing up the scale again to the third of the chord. Root. Third, this is actually like a D chord, or like a D7 with its third F sharp in the bass. Makes it really interesting there. Root, minor third, up. So in this case, I've got G, B flat, minor. There's its minor third, making use of the arpeggio. Then I go to an E, and this is an E diminished. So I can make use of a diminished arpeggio there. That's what happens in the bass line. Pentatonic. It's got some modal interchange here. It started in F major, but then at this section of the song, it goes to F minor. So climbing up the F minor scale there with some pentatonic riffing. These are just a couple of examples. First thing that I thought of that show you how bass lines don't always just play the roots. They're going to use the other notes of the chord. So you want to know, what chord am I playing and what notes does it contain? What's the root, the third, the fifth? You can also make use of scales. You're not going to riff and solo the same way that a guitarist would, but you can add in little things. Or I actually reference some bass lines in my music theory instruction for bass players, but also because guitar players can learn those lines too. They're helpful. So learn some theory, learn some of the stuff that I've mentioned here, and then learn examples of songs that make use of this stuff so you can see it in use. And then as you learn songs, analyze it and figure out when it's moving away from the root and doing something different. Figure out the relationship there so it kind of becomes part of your vocabulary, and then that's something you can use moving forward. Now, bass players do have to be careful. It's nice to put some movement in there and to mix up your note selection, but you're part of the rhythm section. You got to lay down the foundation. You have to do it in a manner where you're still holding down the roots, but you've got some extra movement and some alternate bass notes at times, but you don't want to get too crazy with it because then the bottom kind of just falls out and you're not doing your job, which is to kind of establish that fundamental root of the chord changes. So anyway, I hope that helps. And if any other bass players out there got questions like this, or guitar players who also play bass, I welcome your questions. Send them to me and we'll keep talking about this. I don't have any specific bass courses. The only course where I actually pull out a bass and teach it is I have a course for playing worship guitar music. If you play modern worship music in Sunday morning services, I show you how to play acoustic guitar, electric guitar, and bass. So if you are interested in that style of music, you could check out that course. If you need a link to it, just email me and I'll send it to you. Hey, this next question is about fretboard theory, which I mentioned. Peter says, if I purchase the book, do I get access to the videos as well? And then he also asks, are the songs that you reference in the book, are they tabbed out or available like in the videos? So, this was Peter. So, no, Peter, thanks for your interest in fretboard theory, but the books and videos are sold separately. So I do sell fretboard theory books on Amazon. You could also get PDF ebooks from my website. Or I made a video version where I cover the same scope of information, actually in more depth, in a big full-blown video course, and I do sell those separately. If you buy the video course, though, I do give you PDF book downloads. So, you do not necessarily need the books if you're going to do the video course because it's a standalone course that's got everything that you would need. But some people really like to have something in a book format. Other people learn better with video. There's just a lot more I can do with the video, and a lot of people end up buying both because they really like the material. And next question is all these songs that I reference, do I tab them out or teach them? Well, no, I can't do that. However, I do offer some free resources. You can go to YouTube, my YouTube channel, Desi Cerna Guitar, and I do have a couple of playlists where I teach some of the pentatonic riffs that I reference in my instruction, or some of the major scale songs that I reference, or some of the caged chord system songs. And so I have some little free video tutorials on YouTube. And if you go to the video description for each of those videos, there's a link to my blog where I'll have some tab for just that excerpt that I performed and taught in that video. So that'll help. If you're in the video course, fretboard theory video course, then in those chapters where I do reference a lot of songs and where I make recommendations that you learn them, scroll down below the video because I've got hyperlinks to some resources that can kind of help you do that. I don't have everything tabbed out. I can't teach all that stuff. I mainly focus on teaching the music theory, and then I want to make reference to familiar songs so you can connect what you're learning to something familiar. And then I do offer some free instruction. There's some stuff on YouTube. There's some stuff on my blog to kind of help you get started with that. Other stuff, you can find tabs online at Ultimate Guitar or Songster or something like that. If you're just learning the riff to Lowrider, you don't really need a whole lesson. You can go find the tab for that and pull up the song, and just that riff kind of just repeats throughout the whole song, the bass riff I'm talking about. And there's a couple little variations, and you could figure it out in 5 minutes and jam along with that whole song. All right. Hey, I got time for one more. This one comes from Jeff, and he says, "Hi, Desi. I'm a fairly regular listener to your podcast, and I studied a bit of music theory in school. I always get some insight and takeaway from your episodes. I recently started learning a violin etude on my guitar. It's the famous one you hear in movies or TV whenever there's some kid practicing violin badly in the background. It's Violin Etude No. 2 by R. Kreutzer. Let's listen to it. And he says, I was inspired by a woman at work who regularly practices her violin in a conference room during lunch, and I found a PDF for it online. I think it can be learned fairly easily. I think it can be learned fairly easily by listening to it. You could probably find some tab online. I wouldn't be surprised if it's on Ultimate Guitar. But anyway, he says, to me, this song seems to be a fancy way of practicing the major scale and modes. It's all in C major, except for a few chromatic notes. I play in casual just for fun rock bands, and since doing this, my soloing, improvising, etc. seems to be getting better. I wonder if you have any thoughts on this, if learning and practicing a simple classical piece might help one's rock and roll. Yeah, for sure. You're right. This is using the same scale patterns that we would use on guitar to play popular contemporary pop and rock music, and there's some nice little melodic ideas in it. Maybe you would never actually copy this note for note. Maybe you would. That could be fun or comical. But there's definitely some movement, some melodic patterns in here instead of just playing straight up and down the scale, the way that it's moving melodically. And then that could be a little challenging exercise for your hands, for your fretting hand fingers, coordinating the picking, and so on. So for sure, this is something that could benefit your playing. But keep in mind that learning any piece of music can benefit your playing. So learning a Jimi Hendrix riff can benefit your playing, or learning a John Mayer guitar solo and working it out and practicing it as an etude or exercise can also help your playing. But I've never actually played through this Etude No. 2, but I like the idea. Sounds good to me. And it's sometimes, just doing something a little out of the ordinary can just breathe new life into your playing and just give you an idea that you wouldn't get exposed to any other way. And sometimes it's little things like that just kind of excite us and make us a little better and just kind of help us get to the next level and become an even better player. All right, podcast episode 166 is a wrap. If you have any questions or comments that you would like for me to discuss in future podcast episodes, just head over to my website, guitarmusictheory.com, scroll down and click on the contact link. And don't forget, while you're there, if you have not yet enrolled in a free video course, answer that question I ask you about your playing, and I'll send you free custom video instruction that's calibrated to your current level. Whether you're a beginner or more experienced player or somewhere in between, whether you want to work on theory, technique, or focus on a certain style, I have a free course for you. I can put you on a plan so that you can move forward and reach your music goals. So enroll in your free video course now at guitarmusictheory.com. You can click on the link in the podcast show notes. Don't forget that my books such as Fretboard Theory, Guitar Theory for Dummies, Guitar Rhythm and Technique for Dummies, Guitar Picking Mechanics, and more are available at Amazon.com. And also, make sure you're following me on Facebook and Instagram. Just search for Desi Cerna Guitar. I've been doing a lot of posting lately and putting up some little tutorial videos and just sharing some pictures and clips of some of my live performances and other things. So go to Instagram, go to Facebook, and follow Desi Cerna Guitar. All right, guitar engineers, I'm Desi Cerna. Before you go, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, give it a 5-star rating, and leave some comments or a review if you can. Then keep picking, keep strumming, keep playing, and stay tuned for more.